He came from a patrician New England family. He served in the Navy during World War II, then moved to Texas, where he ran a successful oil company. He lost a bid for the U.S. Senate, but then led a life of public service as a congressman, ambassador to the United Nations, chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief of the liaison office to China, director of the CIA, and after an unsuccessful bid for the presidency, a two-term vice president under President Reagan. He then won the presidency, the first sitting vice president to be elected president in more than 150 years. He navigated the final years of the Cold War, and his administration saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. With broad support, he committed troops to the Persian Gulf when Iraq invaded Kuwait, but his presidency lost support as the economy went into recession, and he was defeated for re-election by Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas. He was active in humanitarian activities after leaving the presidency and proudly supported the careers of two of his sons who ran for office. He is our nation's 41st chief executive, George Bush. Let's take a look at a map of New England and some sites associated with George Bush. Bush was born in Milton, Massachusetts, which is right about here. And the house where he was born is still standing. There's a plaque there, but it is a private residence and not open to the public. Every president after Bush was born in a hospital, so he's the last one that was born in a house. His family, when he was very young, moved to Connecticut, and his father became a U.S. Senator from Connecticut. The other important site to point out here is Kennebunkport, which is in this area. And there you can find the Bush home at Walker's Point. Bush's mother was a Walker. The home is still owned by the Bush family, but you can view it from a scenic road that goes through the area there. You can look out at it and take pictures of it. It's quite a sight. Let's take a look at one other map. This is a map of the state of Texas. Now, when the Bushes came to Texas, they went to West Texas to work in the oil business and lived in Midland. And you actually can visit a house where they lived there. It's actually the George W. Bush childhood home. In later years, the Bushes lived in Houston, and that's where they retired after their presidency. They split their time between Houston and, of course, Kennebunkport. The George Bush Presidential Library and Museum is in College Station, Texas, and that's the location where the Bushes are buried. Now let's take a look at some photographs of these locations. Let's take a look at some books in my library relating to George Bush. John Meacham's book has sort of become the standard biography of President Bush. It was published in 2015, and it's called Destiny and Power, The American Odyssey of George Herbert Walker Bush. This is a book by the Bush's daughter. It was published in 2006, and it's called My Father, My President, a personal account of the life of George H.W. Bush. And another good little book by President Bush 43, George W. Bush. It is 41, A Portrait of My Father by George W. Bush, and it was published in 2014. Here's another great book published in 1999, and it's All the Best, George Bush, My Life and Letters and Other Writings. And it contains many letters that President Bush wrote throughout the years. He was known for writing notes and letters to people, and some are the letters that he wrote to his children, but they're very interesting. Here's another good book. This is an audio book, but it's Speaking of Freedom, The Collected Speeches by George H.W. Bush, read by the author. So he, reads an introduction to each speech, and then you can hear the speech. First Lady Barbara Bush wrote a couple of interesting books. This is the first one from 1994. It's Barbara Bush, a Memoir. And she later wrote another book with some thoughts on her life after leaving the White House, and it's called Reflections, Life After the White House. This one was published in 2003. Bush's vice president was Dan Quayle, who had been a senator from Indiana prior to his nomination for the vice presidency. This is a book that was published in 1992 during the 92 election, and it's called Dan Quayle, The Man Who Would Be President by Bob Woodward and David S. Broder. And after he left the vice presidency, he wrote his memoirs, and this is from 1994, Standing Firm, a Vice Presidential Memoir by Dan Quayle. Here's another really good book, originally published in 1992, and it followed the lives and careers of the candidates for the presidency of the United States in the year 1988. And it specifically follows George Bush, Bob Dole, Gary Hart, Dick Gephardt, Joe Biden, and Michael Dukakis. It's called What It Takes. It's by Richard Ben Kramer, and it goes through their lives and careers up until the 1988 race, and then covers the campaign. Well, in 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that led to Operation Desert Storm in early 1991. And this is a book that CNN put out at the time called War in the Gulf, From the Invasion of Kuwait to the Day of Victory and Beyond. And another small book by Robert Doar talking about the military buildup in Desert Shield. Another book by Bob Woodward, published in 1991, covering a lot of things that were going on, but primarily the war in the Gulf. It's called The Commanders. And also related to this theme here is the autobiography of General Norman Schwarzkopf called It Doesn't Take a Hero. Our next episode will take a look at our nation's 42nd president, Bill Clinton.